So I feel like Lucy deserves a full scouting report now, and I am not the best person to give it, although I follow Lucy on social media. I know that Lucy is a college football expert, and that when I was talking to Lucy out there in the main living room area, is that a living room that we're calling it?
It can be.
Okay. In the main living room area, I was talking to her about this Northwestern story and was floored by the degree of both experience and analysis that she had about this story, which is a thing that I do want to talk about, which feels like right now, I guess, is when we should talk about it.
Transition.
Because that's what she was hired to talk about.
Transition.
Northwestern football. So I'm like a Big Ten West girly. I went to the University of Iowa. I follow the Big Ten so closely. So this Pat Fitzgerald story, it shocked me, like, the degree of what was reported by the Daily Northwestern, which is the student newspaper, of just sexual assault, hazing happening within the Northwestern football program. But I don't really view Pat Fitzgerald as this just, like, shining light. When I was in college, I went to Big Ten Media Days, and we were in a very crowded media scrum, and he addressed me as Missy. Oh. I was a girl just surrounded by all dudes, and it was so demoralizing, and I've kind of hated him ever since. So, like, I don't know how to phrase this, but I don't really like him.
Is Missy the modern day Tootsie?
I feel like Missy is what you should not say when you don't know someone's name.
Yeah.
In an interaction.
And it was,
Just
I was
don't
the
guess
only
Missy.
woman. It was so demoralizing. And then I had to ask him a question. And of course my question was about, like, mascots. So I was like, oh, God, this is so embarrassing.
You'll fit in perfectly around here.
I feel like we should provide some of the backstory, though, on this Northwestern saga, because it has become not just, like, aggressively urgent for Northwestern to solve now, but it's also just been, like, pretty fucked up.
Embarrassing for the president,
right?
to say the least.
So we should start, because we'll get to the president, but we should start with the basic facts here. So the point is that an anonymous former player at the Northwestern football team has come out and said all of these things happened, and all of these things include almost like cinematic hazing that, absent the context of a football team, are just sexual assault. Just like guys being dry humped in the dark by people wearing masks, guys who had to, like, run in between the wet, oiled up bodies of, like, linemen to get into the shower, these claps that would be used over their head to signal that this guy needed to be run, and to be run means to be dry humped in that dark room.
Code red.
There were all of these words, all of these practices, these traditions that are extensive. And Northwestern's ruling on this, after they investigated it for about, 6 months, was it?
Yeah, about so.
About 6 months, they hired, and this is a classic move, is when an institution hires an independent investigator that they have hired. The ruling was information that was provided by this anonymous player had been corroborated by all sorts of evidentiary, both players and bits of and just like stories and anecdotes and all that stuff. But the point is that they ruled that Pat Fitzgerald did not personally know about it. And so they suspended him for 2 weeks.
2 very important weeks in the football calendar.
2 weeks in which they were doing nothing.
0. His 2-week vacation was it's these 2 weeks.
Wait, it's right now?
Right now.
I thought it was like the first 2 weeks of the season.
No.
Oh, that's a joke.
Before
Right
practice
now.
has even begun. And they also recommended that there should be a monitor in the locker room, an independent monitor, such that none of this stuff happens again. And so this came out, and subsequently, the Daily Northwestern, the student newspaper, did some real reporting in which they talked to the anonymous player, they talked to other people, and they found that the problem, seemingly, reportedly, was deeper. And that, of course, Pat Fitzgerald, logically, would have to have known about it.
Or should have known.
Or should have known about it. Because it was that obvious that this was going on.
So I covered this on this morning's Nothing Personal. We did a maybe 20-minute segment on this. And the important thing here is that what's happening is that there was an independent investigation, which was not independent. They discovered that, hey, no big deal, but we're sorry, 2-week suspension. Then there was further investigation by the Daily, which is a journal, by the way, Northwestern known for journalism. These are not schleppers. They're not going to just let it go. And then ESPN gets involved, et cetera. And then all of a sudden the president says, hold on, I may have ruled too quickly. We need to re-examine this and now Fitzgerald, in my opinion, is finished.
I wouldn't go as far to say as Fitzgerald is finished. Coming into like this weekend before this all happened, I would have told you Pat Fitzgerald has one of the most secure jobs in the country. What this guy is to Northwestern is unlike most schools. He was an All-American there. That's a small school. It's hard to get a good coach. He came there, and I know they were 1-11 last year, but they have won under Pat Fitzgerald. He's brought them to the Big Ten championship multiple times. This guy is a god in Evanston. So I think it's going to be a lot tougher than people think for Pat Fitzgerald to leave.
Once Joe Paterno gets taken down, is there not a view that anyone is subject? It's a different thing.
No, but this is where I think parsing the language is useful, right? Because I should be even clear about what allegedly happened. Sexual assault did not technically happen. This was sexual misconduct because...
Yeah, sexual misconduct is like the blanket term to use because sexual assault is a criminal offense that like means a specific thing. So in this case, the allegations are that the players were naked and that they had to... one of the allegations was take snaps under center while the center was naked. So that would, I presume, be sexual conduct, or sexual contact, I mean. But yeah, it's like there's a lot of like hazy legal terminology involved. But the bottom line is like, yeah, the allegations are that players were doing things while naked and that there was a photo that allegedly ESPN and the Daily Northwestern has obtained that had on the whiteboard naked bear crawl with like players' names under it. Naked slingshot with players' names under it. So it was something where if this is written on a whiteboard in the locker room and it has been up for a year, how do the coaches not know about it? Or how can they claim they're not aware of it?
Right. And so the hazing and the haze around the hazing is what's being sorted through right now as people examine actual legal liability. And people have to decide, like, this guy, like the reason he claimed to not be deserving of firing, that he didn't know this was happening, is also, to me, the reason he should be fired. If he didn't actually know it was happening, but it was this widespread and all around him. Like, either way, it's that it's that Paterno Penn State echo of, like, what should you have known, even if you claim you didn't? Because either way, it seems pretty indefensible.
The GM of the Astros claims to this day he didn't know about the garbage cans.
You're a college football coach. Your entire job is to know everything that is happening in your program. And Pat Fitzgerald is a leader of young men. That's his whole thing, is that they do things the Northwestern way and they raise upstanding men. Like, you have to know everything going on in your program.
And so even cynically, I'm realizing, like, okay, leader of men guy, but leader of men guy who goes 1-11 last year and who was 3-9 before that. Like, I understand that he is representative of this high watermark in Northwestern's otherwise, like, pretty sad history of football accomplishment. They have these fancy new buildings and all of that stuff. But now if you can't sell yourself as leader of men guy, and you are then going to suffer the recruiting consequences when you try and convince parents of kids who would get into Northwestern that this is the place for you to thrive as a young man, what are you even doing there still?